We've all seen it a million times before. One little lady suddenly appears to use her magical powers to kick some monster butt. Any otaku worth their salt knows the trope, and most people would quickly point to Sailor Moon as the one who codified most of the things that we see in the genre today. That would be true if there weren't a whole host of magical girls who did more or less the same thing back in the day, around the post-war era. Speaking from a strictly animated perspective, the first anime to feature a magical girl was Maho Tsukai Sally, or Sally the Witch. Fairly straightforward, the series was created by Tetsujin 28 Go creator Mitsutaro Yokuyama in 1966. Inspired by the American sitcom Bewitched, it rapidly grew popular enough to be picked up for a television series in December of that same year. It would run for 109 episodes and be picked up again in 1989 for another 88-episode run. She was quite literally the first magical girl on television. Before her was The Secret of Akko-chan, about a girl named Atsuko who used a magic mirror to turn herself into many different forms. The manga predated Sally the Witch, but the anime came afterwards, so who came first is really only a question of preferred medium. Before either of them was Princess Knight, written by the legendary Osamu Tezuka in 1953. It follows the story of Princess Sapphire, who must disguise herself as a boy to fight Duke Duralumin as the Phantom Knight. She's shown to have a boy's heart and a girl's heart, which has caused no small amount of internal debate as to what the overall theme of the series was. Given that Tezuka is no longer with us, the question is now entirely academic. However, it also set the stage for another set of stories about gender roles and identity in the coming decades, specifically the Rose of Versailles and Revolutionary Girl Utena. The Knight in Ribbons tested the waters for the magical girl genre and found it quite welcoming. However, Tezuka would also create something else 15 years later that would add a final piece to the magical girl puzzle that had yet to be fully envisioned. Marvelous Melmo, or Fushigi na Merumo, is the story of a 9-year-old girl whose mother dies, leaving her orphaned with her two brothers, Toto and Tachi. Her mother sends a literal gift from God, a bottle of candies that can turn her into an older version of herself. However, the difference between 9 and 19 on a body is pretty extreme, as the audience would find out. Melmo's clothes didn't grow with her, which I'm sure you can put together the problems with. Taking 2 of the candies at once turned whoever ate them into a fetus, and then an animal of their choosing, which ended up being more useful than one might think. And you thought modern anime had some weird things to them. The series itself was designed primarily as an adventure story, but also had aspects of sex education. Parents at the time were not particularly pleased with this and the questions it raised, and there are some very distressing implications about the way the story ends, with Melmo getting married to a man who actually is an adult. On the whole, the series got across what it was attempting to do. So what did these stories all have in common? Combining otherworldly powers, magical items, and girl power all into one, there's only one magical girl it could be. But I'll let her introduce herself.
ある時は流しの歌手、またある時は森の木こり。だがその実態は愛の戦士、キューティーハニーさ。
Everything that people commonly associate with Sailor Moon, and rightly so, was also done by Cutie Honey 20 years earlier. Between all sorts of transformations, the pre-fight speech, the weaponry, it all feeds back into Cutie Honey. Well, it's very true that Honey is not the first one to do all these. She was the one that had the longevity over the years. Sailor Moon has her pen that gives her a costume change. Cutie Honey had it built in. Sailor Moon announces herself as the pretty guardian of love and justice. Cutie Honey was the warrior of love. Sailor Moon fights a mysterious organization with an evil queen at its head. Queen Beryl meets Sister Jill. Sailor Moon throws tiaras. Cutie Honey had a sword. The modern magical girl, from Sailor Moon to Magic Knight Rayearth to Lyrical Danoha, all owes something to Cutie Honey. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Cutie Honey is the secret identity of Honey Kisaragi, daughter to a scientist who's making some kind of matter creation device. The name of the machine changes from iteration to iteration, but the thing is quite obviously some sort of matter rearranging device. The good doctor is killed by Panther Claw, an evil organization bent on getting all the wealth in the world, but not before he reveals to his only daughter that she's actually an android with the device built into her. So now Cutie Honey is out for blood against Panther Claw, who will stop at nothing to get the machine for themselves. With an arsenal of transformations at her disposal, Honey will take the fight to Panther Claw and save the world, all in 26 episodes or less. She certainly isn't shy about wounding or killing her Panther Claw enemies either. That sword isn't just for show, kids. Cutie Honey herself was bumped from her original time slot to make way for Magical Girl Limit-chan, which tanked miserably. Because of this, Cutie Honey got a lot more wild and rowdy than it was originally planned to be. Sadly, this might also be the reason that it had such legs, to turn a phrase. Because of the time slot change, the show was retooled to have more violence and nudity than originally intended. This made it match up with the manga a lot more, but now it also had the dubious honor of being the first female protagonist in the shonen series. Which, incidentally, is probably why people remember it so much. The show also had something of a Chester Gould style going with it, where the heroes were handsome and beautiful, and the villains were deformed and hideous. While it was never explicitly stated to be the intention, it's fairly obvious who you're supposed to root for. Though it has unfortunate implications in the modern day, tying morality to attractiveness did at least get the job done for Cutie Honey's purposes. So, just what makes her so great? For starters, Cutie Honey transcended gender boundaries and proved that a female hero can still draw male audiences, which is a hang-up even in today's society. Honey herself would not see an enormous amount of success in the States until very recently, when Discotek Media released the original series. The series itself, however, was very popular in France, where it aired during the late 80s. New Cutie Honey, which was a lot more in the vein of the original manga, would hit American shores in the mid-2000s, despite being made almost a decade prior. After that, in 1997, Cutie Honey Flash would air in the vein of being a much more traditional magical girl show. 2004 saw the Cutie Honey movie get released, helmed by Evangelion director Hideaki Anno, to mixed success. Its partner work, RE Cutie Honey, is much more in the vein of the original works. And finally, in 2007, Cutie Honey the Live, a live-action show, hit the airwaves and refreshed the character in the minds of many. So why do I feel like no one knows about her? Aside from anime historians like myself and the people who have a strange fixation on TV shows made while Nixon was in office, the show didn't exactly make a huge splash here. The movie was direct-to-DVD, the majority of the works in the series never saw a US release. With the amount of digging necessary to get most of the shows in this series, and the wealth of more traditional magical girl shows out there, most fans of the genre will give this a pass. In spite of all that, it remains a shining example of the genre that it helped to form. And so, I present to you the first lady in a long line of great characters you've never heard of. Sometimes she's a motorcyclist, sometimes she's a sultry singer, sometimes she's a photographer, but her true form is the warrior of love, Cutie Honey.